Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is May 22, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Romeo Carey. Where in the heck you calling in from, Romeo?
Uh, Glen Oaks Canyon. I'm inside a canyon.
Hey,
Uh,
it's so
it's
good.
Glendale, California.
It's so good to see you in any way. Mountain, canyon, river. Hey, what's the best thing for a human being?
What's the best thing for a human being? Well, let's break that down. Human being. Humus is soil. Being is given to only one species. That's man. And with that, we're supposed to know how to be. That's why we were given it. We're the only ones on the planet that actually have the ability to know how to be and to recognize human being. We're just a piece of dirt. We're a speck in, a dust in the cosmos,
Well,
right?
that's pretty much anticipating our whole 90-minute talk. So that was pretty dang cool. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
My favorite form is direct from somebody in person. I mean, that's my all-time favorite. But the next substitute is the digital form because I can gobble up so much of it and not take up somebody's time. I'm a voracious gobbler of digital content, voracious, because I'm hungry to know.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Wow, because that's our existence. Our existence doesn't have, I mean, less, I would say there's less people interested in information and more people interested in gathering because we're hunter gatherers. There's not as many people that are interested in information. Uh, Most people don't think about gathering information anymore because they think it's all on a phone.
Some key words there. You're anticipating everything. So do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate in humans or more invented by humans?
Oh, I think it's innate. I
Yeah.
mean, it's innate. It's a full-fledged human being is no different than a full-fledged oak tree. A full-fledged human being is no different than the want of a bee to be a full-fledged bee. It's built with innate, built-in. Uh, uh, it has its own built-in uh, uh, natural born proclivities to go do what it's got to do. That's just part of every cell in the human body has memory, and that memory goes back millions and millions of years. And so the idea of what it is we need to do is intrinsic in whatever entity that happens to be alive. Life is just a spark, and it's got to act on all its memory. Most people think memory's in the brain, but memory's in every cell of the human body. And that, in fact, you think of gut intelligence, and gut intelligence is if you were to take all the brain matter that's found in the gut, you would end up with the brain the size of a cat. And cats are pretty crafty. That's just the brain matter that we know within the gastral, the stomach. So when most people are stuck up here in the head, and they think everything's coming from the head, but every cell in your body is working towards your well-being. Every cell in your body has memory, and when you're hunting and gathering, or whatever it is you do, you're acting on instinct, and no different than a bee. We all have this potential, and we all have this innate ability to be alive and live a full-fledged life.
Beautiful. Do thoughts create emotions?
Do thoughts create emotions? Um, well, I think the moment creates the emotion. The moment creates the emotion. It's not the thought. Uh, it's the moment that creates the motion, but it has to be a reflection of who it meets. I mean, one person might laugh, one person might cry. Depends what state of being each interaction is holding. So if I saw a moment that to me was worthy of crying, maybe I'm the only person in the room that's going to cry because it touched me, because I was receptive to it, because I'm open to it, and it's my state of being that connected with that state of being. I think the less you get away from thought, the more you get away from thought, the closer you are to the real thing.
Beautiful. Could you fill in the blank here, Romeo? I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Until I sense the true essence of what's transpiring. I
Beautiful.
Yeah, I never really go straight to a thought, because when I go straight to my thought, this is what I think of when I go straight to a thought. A thought to me is my hard drive. My hard drive is my archive. That's my ego. That's my go-to for my day-to-day operation. But that hard drive lives in the past, completely useful, but not in tune with the present moment. So I have to cross reference me, the infinite being in the present moment, against the archive. What happened in the past, and how does it compute in this present situation? So I cross reference, and then I arrive. In most instances, I say thank you, but that doesn't apply to the present moment. I got to come up with a different application, and that's what I do. So, you talk about a superhuman being. When you arrive at that understanding, my dad said that. I never understood what he meant by superhuman being man. That's a reference from the world's greatest sinner. And a superhuman being man is when you recognize that that voice in your head is not your friend, but that voice in your head is everything you are. You can't get away from it. But you better recognize that that voice in your head is like a dog humping your leg 24/7, completely useful, completely a companion, and completely a story of your entire life's journey and its collection. But don't confuse it with the present moment, because it has nothing to do with it.
Wow. So well put. Can humans think without language?
Absolutely.
Chomsky says that language is not just words, it's culture, it's tradition, it's a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Romeo, what do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
Well, language is important. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But I think there's more said in in getting in tune with uh, vibrations, and I don't need to know a lot about somebody. I don't even listen to the words. I feel who that person is. I read their face. I read their body language. I've already got it all dialed in. I'm not even listening to what they're saying. So the words are insignificant. And most of the time they are insignificant because the words don't line up with exactly what they're trying to say. But I can read it in their energy. I could read it in their vibration. I could read it in their body language. And that's what I'm looking at. So when you talk about words, you're talking about an intellectual's, uh, an intellectual. See, never confuse wisdom with intellect.
Yeah.
Two completely different worlds. And a person who is caught up in intellect loses sight of the fact that wisdom trumps it every day of the week.
Yeah.
And wisdom has nothing to do with intellect. Intellect is learned data. Learn data from a book. Learn data from speech. Learn data. It becomes bubblegum for the mind, and you just get trapped in it. And don't be confused with the real life experience that will trump intellect every day of the week. Has nothing to do
Yep.
with it. So real wisdom isn't arrived at from a book or from university or from uh, intellectualizing circumstances. Real wisdom is arrived at experience
Yep.
and reflection and seeking and going to places that you haven't been and people that can walk you through it and get you to understand it. But you have to be open to all that's in front of you. And I'm lucky because I've ignored literature. I've ignored the real intellect, the idea of being intellectualized. I was a horrible student, and I had a repulsion for intellect. I didn't know why. I had to arrive at some kind of understanding, but most everything was that I cheated through it because I can get by with my own kind of basic intelligence. But so I never I came to understand that real intellect is a trap, and it's not free. It's got a barrel around true wisdom.
Here's that was good, Romeo. Here's two questions from Alan Turing, 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, I have to think that ultimately thinking is a byproduct of what you've collected in your life. It's a collection. It's again going back to like communicating with the hard drive. It's a
Yeah.
collection. Thinking is of course you've got to spontaneously come up with ideas, but thinking ultimately is a much different uh, place than just being.
Yeah.
Thinking puts you in a state of reasoning and delving into situations that it might be about the present moment, but most of thinking unfortunately has to do with the past or the future or situations that are not of the present moment. Because if you're in the present moment, you're not thinking. Thinking
Right.
gets in the way of the present moment, and thinking leads you into back into yesterday or into the future, and it leads you in all those places that have nothing to do with the present moment. And so when you say thinking part of the soul or derived from the soul, I think thinking is a manufactured byproduct of existing, but it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with true life. True life has no thinking. It's there's no such thing as right or wrong. Only thinking makes it so.
That's right. I like that. The other Turing question was, can machines think?
Machines calculate. I don't think they think. Machines are given hard, code for every type of uh, situation. So they're all computations arrived at. Ultimately it comes down to words that arrive at, but it's all a calculation. And when you're dealing with calculations, you're not thinking. You're being driven by code. You're not being driven by. I mean, ultimately, AI is supposed to become more intelligent than us, but I don't think it has to do with intelligence. It has to do with creating data. Not that we're not creating data, but you have to. Organic thinking can't exist, I don't think, in a we're the supercomputer. Never be confused by the idea that an AI has any look. when an AI when an AI can take a banana and create an AI out of the banana, we consume bread, we consume water, and we create ourselves. We create ourselves just by consuming biology. An AI can't exist unless we create it. It has no way of manufacturing itself. We manufacture ourselves. We ourselves. Never confuse the idea that we're so beyond an AI. Never confuse the idea that an AI is so far away from our capacity. It can't even come close in terms of what the capacity of what we can do. We're the supercomputer. There's no AI that can touch us because we have the capacity to do things that an AI was created. It's not a creation from the divine. It's
Yeah.
a creation. It's a man-made creation. It's going to do amazing things. It's going to make our life simpler, but we're the supercomputer.
Well, that's perfect anticipation. Next question, Romeo. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
I think consciousness is developing as the moment unfolds. Life only takes place where we're breathing.
Yeah.
If life only takes place where we're breathing, that's the only place we're looking at. And what's going on in the present moment? It's unfolding. Who's creating it? Mother Earth, the universe, the cosmos, everything's going on around us. But am I creating it? I have nothing to do with the creation. I can act in it. I can force my will into it. I can become what I want in it. Everything is created. Everything that we know and will ever be is created from within. From within.
Yeah.
Close my eyes right now, I'd still see you.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, we're just a collection of everything we pulled into ourselves. We've created this body out of consumption, out of food, but the body is not. It's not us. We're the energy that actually is going through the motions right now has less to do with the physical body and more to do with the energy that lives within us.
Romeo, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I don't worry.
Wow, that's good. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Earliest memory ever. Well, probably my earliest memories would take me on a trip when I was 5 years old, to Germany. Going
Wow.
going to school in kindergarten in a foreign language. Yeah, but I already knew some German, but that stayed with me. It was a Pan Am strike in the 60s, and I was 5 years old, 1966. Pan Am struck for like 6 months. And so my dad told my mother, who we were visiting my grandmother in Germany, and he said, just stay. When the strike is over, we'll fly you home. So we ended up staying, I think 6 months. But it was an amazing experience just to live in a place, a foreign place, and understand a different culture in its entirety. Pick up a foreign language,
Good.
and yeah, so that's a memory that sticks out early in my life.
Romeo, is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Memory for me is a blessing. I like memory. I have great memories. I'm sure for those that have memories that weren't pleasant, um, it could well be a curse. But I think regardless of what it is, memory is something. If it were a curse, you should be able to rise above it.
Beautiful. So, tell me just briefly, someone within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family who had an impact on you, like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Wow, there's no greater role model or hero than my father.
What did you just sum up? I know we could do a whole 2 hours on it, but just in a few words, what did you mainly get from your dad? What do you think? What's the main trait?
What did I mainly get?
Yeah,
Well,
the main trait or the main lesson or the main enlightenment.
I'll tell you first of all, the main lesson is 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 equally as important as the main function. And most people come into the world with one function, and that's to replicate. That's to replicate, right? Every creature, that's its main function. My father's function, he called himself a producer. So he had 6 kids. I'm the greatest replica of Timothy Carey. I'm it. So Timothy Carey lives because you hear my voice, right? Now there isn't a greater. Shakespeare said, "Let not winter's ragged hand deface. Make sweet some vile treasure thou some place. Is it for fear to wet a widow's eye? Ah! If thou issueless shall hap to die, be not self-willed, for thou art much too fair to leave death's conquest, and make worms thine heir." So what he said was, look, don't be so chicken in life that you're going to leave a widow with a kid, because it would be so much greater to have you still around when you're gone. And why would you rather just leave worms as your heir? Because the worms are going to consume you. So in that, what you have is, the basic understanding, the fundamentals is to reproduce. But my dad did more than that. He wasn't satisfied with reproducing. He knew full well that I have the ability to do whatever I want to do. Anything. And how do I achieve it? I go there. I knock on the door. I go straight to the source and I say, let me in. I'm worthy. I want to play this game. Nothing stopped him. Didn't have a car. He hiked cross country. Didn't matter. I'm gonna go right where I need to go, and I'm gonna get what I need to take. It wasn't a matter of whether I wonder if I can do this. It was a matter, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna get it. No one's gonna take it away from me. I'm gonna get it because I want it. It's like, it reminds me of a scene from Waterhole Number 3. They're fleecing. I guess they're Carol O'Connor. They're fleecing the stuff off him because they just tied him up. Him and James Coburn in Waterhole Number 3, and they say, my father's looking at this little Mexican guy. I forgot his name. He's picking all their pockets for their whatever they got as they're tying him up. And he says, "What is that?" My dad says, "What is that?" And he says, "It's only a watch." And he says, "I want it." So if he wanted something, he's going to get it. It's a really good example of, in life, internally, whatever anybody ends up with, they pulled it into their life.
Yep.
Internally, it was an internal reaching into the world and pulling it into them, and they brought whatever it was that they wanted into their life. Sheer will, sheer determination, sheer understanding that I'm worthy and I'm going to get it, and nobody's going to stop me. Doesn't matter what that is. Climbing a wall of a studio, breaking into a director's office, whatever that was. I'm going to use my own application in determining how to get what I need to get. But I understand that I just got to go that direction and do it completely with the understanding that I'm going to arrive at the place I need to arrive at.
It's really good. Romeo, tell me someone, same thing, outside your immediate family who had an impact on you. And just briefly, what was that impact?
I ran into a lot of interesting characters. I learned early on the importance of older people when I was young, older people. And I learned pretty quickly that there's old people that are pretty dumb and old people that are pretty wise. And the difference is their experience and their ability to reflect and their ability and want and desire to share it. And I met some really interesting characters. I mean, my father had a lot of interesting people in my life, but probably someone who really stood out was um, this guy was celebrated Chinese Taiwanese superstar, made big movies. John Fung, and this guy has an interesting life. He went to an Ivy League school. He was in the army with Clint Eastwood. He worked for the Rand Corporation, doing for the military, for the army, doing psychological warfare on the Chinese and Korean during the war. He'd write all the documentations that would be airlifted and dropped over these areas. This guy was hardcore, just and he'd grown up in China, and this guy was he was an intellect, but he was wise. He'd lived a just an outrageous life in terms of what he wanted and what he got. And I met him when he was in his late 70s, and I knew him for maybe 15 years, but we became really good friends. And he taught me a lot just about life in general. And so I learned a lot from Lawrence Tierney. Lawrence Tierney, super bright, even though he wasn't so bright when he was drunk, but when he wasn't drunk, he was super bright, and he taught me some amazing things about life. Um, what my favorite quote from him was, so I interviewed him too. It started out with an interview for my father's documentary. He's a tough interviewer, a tough interview, but I asked him, so what's the most important thing you've learned in life? And this is a guy with a rap sheet as long as this guy spent time in penitentiaries. This guy was notorious for getting in fisticuffs with policemen, and just this guy was also a Sears and Roebuck model, which would be equivalent to like a Gucci or Calvin Klein model of his day. This guy was it. He was everything, superstar. And he said, "You put good energy out, you get good energy back."
That's a good lesson. Well, okay, let's move on. That was good though. Do you pray?
No, I don't pray.
If God
Sometimes,
ex-
sometimes I do because I'm a Catholic at heart.
yeah, if God does
I
exist,
try to I try to teach my daughter to pray. I want her to recognize it, so I do it with her. But
nice.
personally, I don't pray too often, to be
Yeah.
honest.
If God exists, Romeo, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
If God exists, what would you like God to say to me when I died? Mm, Well, I'd like him to say you lived a full life and you did what you set out to do. That you lived a full-fledged life and you set out and completed the mission that you set out to do.
Good.
And yeah,
Romeo, do evil people exist or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Yeah, probably a little of both. I mean, I think, you know, some people come into the world under circumstances that their environment is one that they don't know any any different way except evil ways, and that could be foisted on them just through their own experience growing up. So people live in those ways because they don't know anything different. But you would hope they'd come to discover that that's wrong, and that they would rise above it. I don't think. I think there is circumstances of evil that you can it can come into your life, but I haven't found that. I found most evil is originates in some household, and then it gets propagated through uh, their offsprings or their circumstances, or it could be gangs. It could be a lot of people that just have bad environments that foster that kind of life.
Yeah. And this is the follow up, Romeo. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up with a few thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the samurai and the mob. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But how would you first respond to the Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Mm, that was the weakest of all of them.
Yeah.
I think that was the weakest of all the other. I I can completely identify with. I don't recognize enemies. I see situations that are screaming for solutions. I don't see problems. I see enemies as a as the same as problems. There are no problems in at least my perspective. There's only situations screaming for solutions. And first of all, to have an enemy, you have to create drama in your life that allows for something like that to fester. I don't create a life where enemies can exist. Now, I might have controversies in terms of thinking, or I might have controversies in terms of what people identify as, and I don't see them as enemies. I see them trapped in an identity. I don't identify with anything. I don't identify with a group. I don't identify with anything under the sun. I don't identify, because then I'm trapped in that identification. So most enemies identify uh, so permanently with that particular identification. If it's culture, if it's a party, if it's whatever that identification is, I recognize it as a basically a surrender of your individuality. And anybody who's surrendered their individuality, they've become a slave to an identity. And it's, for me, I see it as compassion. I don't see it as an enemy. I see it as somebody, gee, maybe I can get to them, and they can hear like the idea of, it's not a good idea to surrender your individuality, because now you have no voice except the voice of a foot soldier for your identity. It's unfortunate, because we're herd creatures. Everybody thinks like you got to run to this little pile of identity types to be able to be a real person, and be able to have the safety of the mob, because I could just hide in it. And it makes sense, because if you go watch a leopard track down a zebra, a herd of zebra, the black little buffalo is going to get eaten first because he doesn't fit in, right? The black buffalo gets identified because he's not part of the herd, and he's the track. You can track on it, lock on it, and take it down. So it's if you become part of the herd, it's safety. But I mean, I come from such a hardcore individual. I always wanted to know, what does the word independent mean? What does the word independent mean? I was young. I was like, I'm going to start my own production company. I'm an independent filmmaker. I'm like, what's an independent filmmaker really? And so I look up the definition of independent. And what do I find? I find this guy, Alexander Poe. I'm like, oh, what does that like say? This is an old dictionary, right? You wouldn't find it in the dictionary anymore because that's just too much. So I look up Alexander Poe, and it says, let fortune do her worst, whatever she might bring, as long as she doesn't take away your independence and your freedom. I'm like, oh shit. Whoa. So independence means freedom. Damn, I like that. Now I get what my dad was talking about. He wants to be free. He wants to be free. I'm like, shit. So why are all these people surrendering their independence? I guess they don't want to be free.
They want that comfort in that safety zone. Your dad had courage, and he was willing to take risk. It's beautiful how articulate you are, and I love you being dramatic with these recitations of Shakespeare. And
now stop for a second. Think how long ago did I meet you, Jerry?
Well, you met me, you said, when you were 15.
What year was that? What year was the Ann Arbor?
I would say
film co-op.
The Ann Arbor Film Co-op sponsored Tim Carey in Ann Arbor, Michigan, probably mid 70s to late
1976.
76 in 15 is 11. Well, it's not. I'm not sure, but if you were 15 then,
no more than 16.
Yeah, you were 16 in 1976. That's a
50-year-old. I've known you for 50 years.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, 50 years. But this is good because you really anticipated the next question.
I didn't anticipate it. I didn't anticipate it. It just happens to be that way.
No, I mean it just happened, but it's evoked it, and there's a saying on your email. It says "create to live." So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago, and he basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I agree.
Yeah, well, the question is, why do we have to recreate things in order to get them?
Well, unfortunately, most people don't recognize that life is the movie.
Yeah.
They don't. And because they don't recognize that life is the movie, they live vicariously through watching movies. I don't go to movies. I get trapped on planes, and I watch a lot of movies. Then I don't have time for movies for the most part. But movies are a beautiful thing because you take a tribe of Bushmen, and if you videotape them, they think they stole your spirit, right? They're like, "Hey, you can't take your camera because you got me in there. I don't want you taking me with you." I mean, there's people who have gotten in trouble in Africa doing just that, because there's, if there's ever a God on earth, it's the God who has the ability to create life in the celluloid form, or the digital form. Yeah. So I think there's something amazing in the capacity to be able to reproduce an image and
Yeah.
to be able to watch it and to be able to propagate it. It's just it's a fascination, and more than that, it's the ideologies that can be expressed in dramas, and uh, the right ideologies are essential for civilization's evolution, and recognize that word evolution. We haven't arrived. We're in an evolution.
Yeah.
And the greatest state of the evolution today is the dawning of consciousness. And that if we get closer to understanding how vitally important consciousness is, we can come closer to a humanity that's in a more joyful place.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And what do you think the motive of the cave artist was?
Expression.
Yeah.
Expression. I mean, the capacity to, no different than a modern day filmmaker,
Yep.
a modern day YouTuber. Expression. It's a divine instinctive quality in humans to express. It's innate. It's not like the bees' innate capacity to find pollen. We have that same instinctive quality. It's
Yeah.
part of our memory. It's part of who we are. It's it's uh, it's it's in ourselves.
Yeah. In Romeo, you eventually, in young years, decided to pursue filmmaking and education. I mean, you're both. And I'm curious because a screenwriting teacher told me great film or great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
That's a difficult question. I mean, it's kind of intention. I think uh, I think intention is. I mean, I love the idea when you see a film and you know who made that film by just the way the film was made. There's a quality and an intention that's pushing the storyline. There's a quality and an innate kind of vibration that lives within the that that kind of timeless piece of art. And whether it's one or the other, it's still the same. There's an intention behind it. Obviously, what created it was an intention. Whether the intention came from another, whether how did you put it? What was the
Well,
original question?
great film or great art is when you can clearly see the intention. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art or great film is when you can clearly not see the intention. So the question is basically, what role does intention
Got
play?
it. Got
Yeah,
it. So no, well, you're right, because Kubrick was, on another level, and so his objective was to, like, well, I'm not gonna give up what the intention is. You're gonna have to figure it out, and then it's gonna by the time by the time it hits you, you're gonna be so buried in it that you don't even know what happened. I mean, that's because he's operating on another dimension, but um, uh, the whole
it's
objective
sort
of
of
it.
like, all Walter Pater said all art aspires to the condition of music. It's like music is a little more abstract in deciding the intention. But people could say, well, I'm storytelling. And like Stravinsky says, music doesn't mean anything. So it's a little like that. We know that some art forms, you write a book, people expect you to have an intention in writing the book? But maybe this question goes a little further here and susses this out is Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. When you're making a film, how much are you thinking of your audience?
Well, most everything that I produce, my audience is primary. I mean, I'm trying to, I'm always anticipating what my intention for the viewer is, and I create it in a form that makes it consumable completely in line with what my objectives were. What am I trying to sell? What am I trying to, the idea is to entertain and to keep viewers, but uh, the whole genesis of any art form ultimately is to deliver a message, a vision. And great movies have uh, great movies have great intentions behind them. It's not, they don't always come out the way the director intended, but uh, you know, I mean, you take like The World's Greatest Sinner, my father's film. His intention was only one. He wanted to create controversy, and he was tired of what Hollywood called controversial, because he'd go see a controversial film and he'd say, "What? The producers of this movie, the studio, they're selling this advertisement saying this thing is the most controversial film you've ever seen." And I go watch it and I'm like, "What? It's not controversial. What in it is controversial?" They're selling the idea that it's controversial. They're telling you the intention of the studio was to do a controversial film, but there's nothing in the content that's controversial. So he goes, "I guess the idea of today is like there's got to be controversy. So let me up them and be honest with what is controversial. So let me like prescribe a storyline that is the ultimate in my vision of controversy." That's it. That's The World's Greatest Sinner. It's also the birth, the brainchild of controversy.
But what do you think was Tim's um, origins for courage and risk taking? Was it in his DNA? Was it the way he was raised? What caused him to have that courage to do that and say, I want to push controversy to another level and say, if you, yeah, no,
He
he
was
had to have,
he was
you touched on it earlier. What is the roots of his courage and risk taking, being a maverick?
Wow, he lived during the Depression, so that just surviving that, and then being in the Marines at 15 and surviving that, and never getting past the 10th grade. Uh, the advantage of not being intellectualized, the advantage of having uh, no commercial or education in film except being an actor and watching it from the outside was a huge advantage, because he didn't live in the barrel of commercial filmmakers. Educated filmmakers live in a barrel. They're stuck to formality and formula. They're stuck to what they've been taught, and you can create some amazing commercial product with that. But the idea of the individual and the vision of a like an idiot savant having no barrel stopping the creative flow and having complete dictatorship of its final product can produce genius, because there's nothing stopping it. Nothing. It's First of all, you do have to have courage, but the courage comes from, probably more than anything, ignorance. And
Mm.
ignorance in a filmmaker's world is, it's the birthplace of originality. I mean, you have to be ignorant to be able to do things like that. And you have to have, I would say, my dad never had a lack of courage. He was born with uh, just you know, there was nothing that's going to stand in his way. If he had an idea and he thought it was, he didn't have to check with somebody if it was a good idea. He had to check with himself, and that was good enough. I mean, John Cassavetes said something pretty brilliant. He said, this was at a this he came to speak at a cinema school, and it was a school of writing, and it was a class talking about filmmaking and how to write films. And he said, Cassavetes said, they asked him, you've done all these films, you've won, nominated for an Oscar and won an Oscar, you did all these, did all these brilliant films, independent films. How did you? What was your inspiration? How did you come up with these scripts? And he said, say what you are, not what you want to be, not what you have to be. Just say what you are, and what you are is good enough.
Yes. It's beautiful. And so, I spoke with Michael Apted 40 years ago when MTV was first breaking. And I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged? Excuse me, feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know. Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it really flourished in 1980 when MTV started, to the point where Marty Scorsese was cutting his films faster because of MTV. He said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. So Michael Apted said, well, we've learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I think a little of both. I think we could take in information faster, but Joe Rogan's a good example of information taking 3 hours and succeeding at that. So we have, I think, a desire to hear long form. We also have a desire to see the highlights, and depending on what it is, what's the content that you're producing. It's all commercialism demands kind of a quicker tempo, because you're commercializing something. This is for money, and something for money has to be contained in shorter bites because the collective demands it, because I don't have time for a 3 hour movie. It's got to be under 2 hours. It's got to be an hour 20. Um, that's commercialism. And so and then Joe Rogan isn't commercialism. Joe Rogan is an independent version of his storyline, right? While you discover people around the world want to hear every minute of something in its entirety. I remember once I talked to I interviewed Steckler.
Dennis.
Dennis Steckler. What was
Yeah.
his middle name? Dennis Ray Steckler.
Yeah.
And he shot the majority of the world's greatest sinner. And he in the interview he says, "Oh, what I would do for a camera, just on The Killing, if it was there right there on the side, just collecting everything. I would watch every minute of every day that they produced any of that." Can you just imagine a documentary in real time, just on the set of any movie that you really want, The Godfather or something like that? Just watch that camera. You imagine what that would be worth, a documentary in real time. Well, yeah. I mean, it's there's something to be said about things happening in real time and not being interrupted by commercials or commercialism. And that's the beauty of spoken word and the power of conversation. And conversation's under attack right now. we don't want to have conversations. We want conversations to be relegated to what we want to hear, not what you want to talk about, but what we want to hear. And we're going to be, the arbiters of what we're going to hear in the future. And
Yeah.
so the birthplace of humanity is and all that goes into life is the exchange of ideas. And uh, when you attack that, you've got to kind of be aware that uh, you're now entering a realm of stymieing the most basic, fundamental. It's without that we have no exchange. And the idea is, look, the beauty of it is, if I'm wrong, everybody's going to tell me I'm wrong, and I get to learn from that. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I've changed my mind about things, and it's countless. Why? Because I've had this exchange, this beautiful thing called conversation, and the exchange of ideas and words, and coming to different conclusions. It's the birthplace of all kind of human existence.
It is so well put. I agree with you. Can humans literally multitask?
Oh yeah, humans multitask all the time. I multitask. I mean, it's like that's my life. My life is multitasking. I mean, it's once you put yourself into a mindset, and you've exercised your capacity to do things, because life is really predicated. You talk about people who get paid more money, and to get paid more money for doing something, what do you think is the reason one person would get paid more over another?
Well,
It's competencies. Not only
yeah.
competencies, but what you take on. What you take on in form of competencies. So competencies are your ability to do things competently, and if someone sees that you can do it and they're asking you to do it, now you've got another job. And how many competencies can you accomplish, and how many tasks can you fulfill, is really predicated on one's own ability to drive into those realms. But the more competencies you take on, the more money you make, right?
Well, what's more important? Yeah, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction or compromise? I think it's a little of both. I think you have to have conviction, but you have to be willing to compromise. So they kind of they're they're a they're a cousin.
Do artists have moral obligation?
I think human beings in general have moral obligations. Artists don't always recognize moral obligations, but in art, I think it's an open. Art shouldn't be relegated to moral obligations. Art should be open to the interpretation of the artist, and it should be honored as a vision of some artist who wants to express, and
Yeah.
not to take it personally.
You've accomplished a lot, Romeo. Rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Hmm. Luck, skill, and ambition. I would say one. I have one ambition, second skill, third luck. I couldn't have gotten where I got unless I had an ambition. I couldn't have gotten the position unless I had the skills, the proven skills. Luck came last. You can't base your life's experience on luck unless you're playing the lottery. But in real life, you have to have competencies. You have to do the work. You have to have the experience to be able to do the job. You can't fake it. There's actually real work that has to be done.
Beautiful. T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
My inner dialogue, well, I mean, my inner dialogue is joy. I've set, you know, in life you're born and a line is struck. That's your life's journey. There's two lines that are marking that line. One is birth, one is death. In it, you're given this golden dial, and this golden dial, once you realize that you set the dial for your life, and it's got a million settings. I set mine to perpetual contentment. You're given this vessel, and this vessel that dial is attached to is a communicator, and that communicator has the ability to receive and transmit, but more importantly, it's a translator of everything coming in. I'm just making noise right now, and 100 people could hear my noise and decipher it in 100 different ways. But if your meter is set to filter everything in the state of contentment, doesn't matter what other vessels are sending you. What matters is your translation, and it's going through your filter. Your golden filter is going to turn whatever's coming into you into joy. And so if you set up your life in that way, everything is in the state of joy. I wouldn't want to live anyplace else. And it's too bad that people teach everybody that your feelings can get hurt by other people. It's a lie. Your feelings can't get hurt by other people. Doesn't matter what anybody says to me. Doesn't matter what anybody says to me, because I recognize it as a vessel who's sending me a message that's set it nasty. Whatever it is, it could be misery. Misery loves company. It's like a black cloud coming right towards you, and if they're your friend, they're gonna try to pull you into their misery. But what you have to do is have compassion. Have compassion. Next door neighbor, my daughter, who was talking to a next door neighbor, she was doing these math equations, and she's older than my daughter's 9, and he's talking to the 6-year-old across the street, and the 6-year-old couldn't figure out the equations, just simple multiplication. And the parent said, "Hey, you're making my son feel bad. Quit giving him hard math questions." And I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, you're making him feel bad." And I go, "What? You don't teach your son that someone else can make him feel bad. He's the master of his feelings. We have nothing to do with his feelings. Nothing. If he doesn't like the math and doesn't like what he's hearing, the idea is you're in charge of your feelings, nobody else. Why would you teach him that someone else has control of his feelings? It's just the worst kind of lesson you can give anybody in life, that somebody can control your feelings, that you're going to allow somebody onto your golden dial to set your feelings.
That's right.
They didn't understand.
Yeah. It was beautiful saying joy. I really appreciate your words, compassion and joy. Touched me deeply. Romeo, can you forget to die?
I think so. I can forget to die. I mean, the idea is we should all be ready to die. We should all be prepared to die. It shouldn't be any different than being born. The idea that we have no control over it. I'm in the state of mind that I forget to die. I know it's going to happen. I'm not thinking about it. I'm too busy living. I think you live. Your energy field is alive as long as you can animate it and whatever is given to you, whatever that is. But to live in a state of like fear of death is not living. You wanna meet it as a transition. You want to meet it as, see, I see it as energy. We're just the shell. Within us is the energy, and that energy just didn't show up. It arrived, and that energy will go someplace else.
Is perception reality?
Is perception reality? Well, I mean, it's our reality. Is it what it is? I mean, I have no other point of reference except to take in what I see. And for me, is it reality? It's it's kind of all I have in terms of it's kind of interesting because whatever it is, it disappears, right? I mean, everything that's a reality, all poof, it's all gone. I'm more concerned about just I'm just concerned about life, where life takes place. Life only takes place in one place where you're breathing. Can't take place anyplace
Yeah.
else. Where will your future arrive? It'll only arrive in the present moment. So whatever it is you want in life, dial it all in right now, and do everything in your power to set your sights on what it is you want. And if you aim at something big, whatever that is, it's a good chance if you stick with it and you put all your energy into it and you keep your attention focused on it, that you'll get it. It's everything I ever wanted in life is the reality. You talk about reality. Reality is living out your dream. Reality is focusing on something bigger than you and staying with it to the point of fruition. Reality. I mean, what is reality? Reality is. Oh, I mean, is this reality? I mean, our conversation right now. What reality is this? I mean, it's as real as it can be. It's the unfolding moment. And we're capturing it, but to be
It's
honest,
live TV. It's pretty amazing that we're on live TV worldwide. So that was really beautiful what you said there. It touched me again, Romeo. And Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
well, I don't have breakfast. I try to. I eat a handful of nuts a day and then one meal. But the impossible, yeah, I always dabble with the idea of impossible. The problem is uh, setting a setting. I managed to like take on 2 full-time jobs. If there's a thing, one of my sayings: if you're not playing a big enough game, you'll screw it up. So I've saddled myself in a position where I'm playing such a big game that I have a million excuses not to take on the things that I really should be taking on. It's like my ultimate excuse in not uh, really fulfilling my ultimate destiny. But I also recognize where I came from and my capacities. I know full well I can take on, once I set my mind to it, I can do in 1 year what anybody else can do in 10 years. And I haven't given up that ambition.
Well, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Well, I've discovered that I've been kind of fortunate in that I've Well, I mean, I've had a lot of weaknesses in my life that have turned into that I've turned into strengths. I mean, I used to be terribly shy when I was young, and grew up in El Monte, which is like end of the Santa Fe Trail. It's it's like Mexico, USA. It's a it was a rough part of town. The pioneers ended up there. It was the end of the Santa Fe Trail where all the pioneers ended up. All the bars and hookers, and it was known as really a bust up kind of town, and it grew up that way. And I when my when we settled there, uh, my father taught me early on to defend myself. And being a really shy, kind of scrawny kid, um, he taught me like the 1-2 punch. I'm like, "What did you teach me the 1-2 punch?" I'm 5 years old, and he like pulls his big, massive hands out, and I gotta. So he's teaching me the 1-2 punch. The 1-2 punch is you jab with your left and hit with your right. And I hold up his hands. He goes, "A jab, hit one of his hands with my left, and then give me everything with your right." And we do it, and we do it weeks on ends, months. And he says, "Son, you're too weak." He's like, "Come on, give me something." It's like this too weak. And I want to hit him as hard as I can hit him. I couldn't hit him hard enough. And this went on for a year. Finally, just before I started first grade, I was able to really sting his hand. He goes, "Ah!" He goes, "That's it. See that punch you just did? That punch, the only punch, the whole year. That punch, I want you to use that punch." "Use that punch for what?" He says, "You're gonna when you start school tomorrow, there's a good chance someone's gonna come up to you, and you're gonna have to defend yourself. This is a guy called he's a bully. He's like the ringleader of something. He's gonna cause problems, and I want you to know that you have my permission to do the 1-2 punch. And how you're gonna do it is you're gonna ask the guy you don't want to hurt him. This is someone who's going to come up to you, and you're going to know it. He's going to hurt you. And he might have pushed you down, might have done whatever he did to you, but he wants to start a fight with you. Tell him you don't want to hurt him. But if you touch me, I'm going to hurt you. Warn him. And then when he touches you again, I want you to take your right hand, just as you punched my hand. I want you to take your left, and I want you to jab at his face. Don't hit his face. And I want you to take your right hand and put it right through his stomach. Don't hit his stomach. Go right through his stomach. That's the breadbasket. I want you to hit him just the way you hit me in his stomach. Okay. Promise me that. You're never going to be in trouble. You can't be in trouble with anybody because I'm in charge. You're going to have to answer to me. Okay. No principal, no teacher, anything. You're in that situation. You have my 100% permission to go take care of business. Start school. First day of school was fun. Lunchtime comes, and I'm sitting out in the field talking to some new friends I just made, and all of a sudden I get bulldozed. Somebody just lays me out on the lawn. I'm like, I get up, and I'm like crying. A guy walks in front of me who bulldozed me. He's in my class. It's this big Mexican kid, Mondo. And he walks up to me and he says something to me. And I say, if you touch me again, I'm gonna hurt you. And all his friends are like laughing. And so he goes like that. And before he could touch me, I went for his face and I put my hand right through his stomach. Felt like the Pillsbury Doughboy because this kid was overweight. And I went right through him. And boom, he went straight back. He was on the ground crying like a baby. All his friends were like, "Oh my God, this guy laid out Mondo." Next thing you know, Mondo's my best friend. It's like, don't mess with
Well,
that guy.
that was amazing because the next question was anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Anger can be a productive emotion when you don't go to anger. You can't. You can't.
That's
Anger.
amazing.
Anger. Anger. Nah. Anger just is red. You don't think well in anger. Don't go to
Yeah.
anger. Don't ever go to anger. But the idea is, you shape yourself by how you are able to deal with situations. But anger is not a constructive mechanism for anything good.
You are super wise. Romeo, tell me one major element of your creativeness in being a filmmaker and an educator that's changed in the years you've done it, and one major element that stayed the same.
Well, I mean, of course, it's all now digital content, and it's driving stuff on TikTok and YouTube, and so I mean, it's gone through a metamorphosis. I come from the world of film. You imagine? I mean, I put up some images of some stuff I had in my studio, like a cutting block. But what's that? What is that? It's like cutting, splicing, a splicer and a sound block. Is like, wow, can't even imagine what that was used for. But the trends, the kind of transfer from 16 to the journey from 16th and 35 and Super 8, and then going into tape and digital is, uh, I mean, it doesn't change. I mean, the idea of the technology doesn't change the ideology. It's just the vehicle that they're now housed in. All
Yeah,
the best stuff remains the same. And the more you get back to basics and kind of rudimentary filmmaking, the better it is.
it's beautiful. How do you find peace of mind?
You don't find it; it lives within. Don't
Nice.
go searching for anything. Don't go searching for happiness. Don't go searching for joy. All of it is all within. It's not.
That's
You won't find it anyplace else. It's 100% within.
that is beautiful. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I would say. I would say. Do whatever it is that you really want to do in life. All the doors will open if you lean against them, and that, um, aim high in life in terms of what it is you really want to accomplish. Or the other thing is, if it's amazing that in our kind of contemporary world, everything is about being the best at everything. My dad was that way. I want to be the best. It's my last film. So it's kind of, you want to be the best at whatever it is you're going to do. It doesn't matter what it is you intend to do, but push the limits of what you can do and do it the best. Try to be the best at everything. If you're an actor, your last movie is your last vehicle. You want it to be the best. You want it to be the zenith. You want it to go to the Himalayas on that film because it might be your last film. At least people remember, like, wow, he was pushing it to the very end. He didn't sell out to commercialism. He was bound to an expression at at the highest limits of his capacity. And so, I mean, the idea is I would tell myself, my 12-year-old self, take on the world, do the greatest job you think you can do. If it's the postman, be the greatest postman. If it's a writer, be the greatest writer. Whatever it is you're going to take on, just do it your best. That's all you can, live a full-fledged life.
It's really well put. In Romeo, there's a line that goes, "You create what you resist." Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into, "You are what you hate." James Joyce said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And Louis Buñuel said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So this idea of one creates what one resists, not so much you, but just in general, people create what they resist. Any thought on that thought? Any reaction to that thought?
I think, I mean, it does hit a chord on The thing you want the most, you kind of like resist. The thing an artist wants the most, a lot of artists find a way to avoid taking it on. Um, uh, I love Buñuel. I love was it Salvador Dali, Un Chin Andalou.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, but yeah, I think there's some truth to that on a lot of different levels. I mean, you know, the idea is we resist. I think the thing we want the most. We resist uh, fulfilling the ultimate desires because of, you know, it's I think is there's in some people there's you know an innate uh, kind of blockage, and you got to get past that to conquer the beast. You got to destroy. You have to destroy that that obstacle, whatever that is. I mean, somebody watched. They watched The World's Greatest Singer, then they watched Tweets Ladies of Pasadena, you know, my dad's second film. And he said, this guy was really brilliant. He said, man, Tweets Ladies of Pasadena, your father destroyed the lion. He just tore it to pieces. That obstacle would be blocking any artist's like uh, uh, the thing that would stop you from being the best you can be. He just ripped it to shreds. There wasn't even the lion had nothing left of him. He just left him in shreds. He's like, I can't imagine how you make a film like that. It's just unbelievable. It's just like
It is amazing. And I always loved him going, they go, what's your best film? I mean, dude did 2 films with Kubrick and 2 films with Cassavetes and Elia Kazan and James Dean. Is like, what's your favorite film? He goes, my next film. It was always like just what you said was so well articulated. Well, we just got about 8 more minutes, Romeo. This has been fun. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
something good that I never had and I never want. Well, yeah, something good that I never had and I never want. Well, there's a lot of things good that I never had. I would say, I mean, it'd be nice to have an, you know, a pad in, you know, Cannes, you know, in the south of France. Um, but
Yeah.
I never had it. I mean, there's things. Um, I mean, I don't have a lot of things that I want in turn that I think I'm
Yeah.
missing. I think anything that I want, it's within my realm to get.
Yeah.
It's everything's a possibility. It's not a I don't feel left out or I don't feel like I've missed anything because whatever it is I want, I've discovered that I can call it if I want it. If the desire is there, I'll dial it in. I've been really I've been really fortunate to learn the art of manifestation and
Yeah.
whatever that is. And I teach it to students. I mean, we compete on, you know, national levels. I'm going to Georgia in June with a team that beat out everybody in California. Uh, and we do it every year. There's hundreds of thousands of people that are part of it, and there's every school. You know, you got Microsoft and Google and all these private schools that compete with us, and we take them all down. And we do it 6 out of the last 7 years. And they ask us, "How do you do it? Can you talk to our team and just like, can you like mentor them because we want to do what you do?" And I said, so I talked to their team and I said, well, we already won it before we came here. before we competed, we already won. We already won first place in broadcast media because we did all the work. We suffered everything there is to suffer. We know everything there is to know. And we've practiced it so much that we already own it. You're going to have to rip it out of our hands. And they just didn't understand what that meant. They were like, what? That's it? Yeah.
I love your word manifest too. That was good. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I would probably take the bag of shit and stand on it.
I've never had that answer in 40 years. That is a great answer. Just a couple more. You know, Thornton Wilder, the playwright, said art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes, Romeo. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
Well, for me, I think, you know, art is an expression, whether it's you're hiding something or you're being explicit. I think the best art is explicit. It's explicit. Nobody has anything to hide. It's their expression. A lot of times they're pushing ideas. For me, I'm trying to be a student of consciousness. I'm really trying to understand. You know, people say, "Well, live in the moment." I'm taking it deeper than that, in way of recognizing that life only takes place where you're breathing, and when life only takes place where you're breathing, you only have this little space, this unfolding little space, this unfolding little place to deal with, right? And if that's where it's at, all my attention is right there. All my attention is right here, right now. And my little daughter came in here. I should have brought her in. Would have been cute, because I ignored it. She wanted to be on it for a second, and I didn't let her. That was like not being true to the moment, right? The idea is, when the moment unfolds, don't let it pass, because that moment is here. It's Prima.
But Romeo, did you get that? Did you get that? It's a beautiful thing, be here now attitude. Did you get that more on your own, or more the way your dad and mom raised you?
All the above.
Yeah.
All the above. My mom was like leap years ahead of everything. Come here, Preem.
Me confused what?
I saw you standing there. No, I got it mostly. I got it because I had a Here's Prima.
I wasn't standing there.
Hi.
Hi, Prima. You're on TV worldwide. Good to see you. Nice to meet you.
I've known Jerry for like almost 100 years.
50 years.
All right, Prima. Want to go back to work?
You have a beautiful smile.
Yeah.
What a way.
But yeah, I mean, my mother was like into the, you know, she had to deal with my dad, so she was like a Buddhist. She was a mystic, no doubt. Wow. You met her. My mom. I met her. My mom was on another level, and she taught me.
Amazing.
She taught me a lot about what at least what my thinking has arrived to be. And my father, he was a philosopher and a poet, which you know, but he was a little too caught up in his thinking, and I wanted to rectify that by taking it to the next level.
Yeah, it's good. You know, my two quotes about thinking, because we started with the discussion of thinking, I love, is Captain Beefheart said, I had too much to think. You know, instead of saying I've had too much to drink, he says I had too much to think. And then the Marx Brothers are in a jam, and one of them says we've got to think, and the other one said we already tried that. So just in closing, Romeo, I really appreciate this time together. It's been enlightening. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Well, I think there's a degree of, you know, with technology. I think that helps a lot. I mean, there's I think the greatest opportunity to expand consciousness in ways that are no different than the 60s. Only this is on a level and on a par that can make the difference in the world. And that to me is promising. It's the antidote to everything that's in disarray and the evils of the world. It's the antidote to bringing harmony and peace in the world, because there's no, with everything we got, with all the advent of technology, we're on the precipice of a life that should be easier for everyone. And that it's not like, oh, I'm going to lose my job. No, your life just got easier because we're going to have all these bots doing, all these robots doing your job. Now we can become philosophers and artists, and it's going to usher in an era of untold beauty. But we have to get in harmony with who we are and what means anything in the world, and consciousness, and the kingpins of it, guys like Sadhguru, India, guys like Eckhart Tolle, people that are really in tune and have huge followings, are Pied Pipers. And so I see it a promising future. Just, even, this whole conversation was that basically. I'm echoing kind of the tones of what I think are most important in the world. And if I could open the minds of one person into that kind of energy field, and that attitude, and just look for it, it's right there. And life doesn't have to be a burden, but it should be a joy, that you can bring that much more joy to the world just as a single unit. We're all connected.
Yeah, you're echoing and vibrating that joy and compassion really well, Romeo. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and I really appreciate it. We've known each other for over 50 years, and I hope it goes on for another 50 years and then another 50 years after that. So even though I'm going to hit the end button now, let it. That was weird. The internet went out for a second, so I didn't hit the end button. That was weird. So
That was
Romeo,
weird.
that was super weird. That was Tim coming through. He farted the system. Let us quote the great Tim Carey: "Live long, live healthier. Let thy arse
make wind."
Thank you, Romeo.
Thank you, Jerry. Take care. God bless.
Love you. Bye.
Love you too. Toodaloo.